Here are 5 Greek ideas in very quick form. They're going to help you understand the New Testament better. Number 1, there's a guy named Aristotle, and Aristotle was a big believer in the physical world. He asked the question, how do we know stuff about stuff? And came to the conclusion that we know stuff through our 5 senses. And that belief, which is often called empiricism, is the basis for what at least half of people at the time of the New Testament thought about science and the physical world. Aristotle's teacher was a guy named Plato, and Plato had a slightly different take on the question of how we know stuff. We come to call this rationalism. Simply put, rationalism is the belief that, yeah, we know some stuff through our 5 senses, but there's this whole other world that we don't see that is more real and more true than the physical world. The physical is just like a shadow, an impression of this more true universal reality. Plato further would say that the wisest people in this world are the ones who transcend the physical world and become aware that there's something bigger out there, and then step back down here into the muck with us normal people and lead us into understanding this more transcendent reality. And understanding this idea of rationalism is really going to help you when you read John chapter 1, because John was really playing off of these ideas to point to the authority and importance of Jesus. A couple hundred years after Aristotle and Plato, there's this guy in Athens named Epicurus, and he has a school of thought named after him, Epicureanism. This one's pretty easy. He just believed that humanity had become enlightened, and that their old superstitions about the old gods were restrictive and unnecessary, and that the point of life was not to please these invisible gods. The point of life was pleasure, so live it up. This one's going to come in really handy when you encounter Acts chapter 17 and Paul's trip to Athens, because Paul is engaging with philosophers who thought this stuff. In the 200s BC, Epicurus had a rival by the name of Zeno, who also lived in Athens. And Zeno would say, "What are you talking about, man? The point of life is restraint, and to pull back the reins on those desires and impulses that would cause us to live unwisely, and instead to do our duty, fulfill our obligations, and in this we find dignity and meaning." Again, this guy's ideas come up big time under the name Stoicism in Acts chapter 17, as Paul argues with philosophers who thought that stuff on his trip to Athens. And finally, during the time of Jesus and the early church in the 1st century AD, there's a really popular, trendy point of view that, for lack of a better word, we call dualism. And dualism is based around the idea that pretty much everything can be explained by tensions between opposites. Light and dark, the physical and the spiritual, up and down. When Jesus came along, people who embraced dualism said, "Oh, wow, that fits really nicely with Jesus. Let's combine these 2 ideas." So they said Jesus represents light and truth and the spiritual, and the God of the Old Testament represents darkness and deception and the physical. All of those things are bad, and we aspire to the things that Jesus wanted. And this becomes known as the Gnostic movement on the fringes of Christianity. And so this dualism is what John is pushing back against in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, where he offers a friendly but firm critique of that mentality. The bottom line is, these very basic concepts or outlooks on the world were things that absolutely shaped the way people thought at the time of Jesus. And if we get how people were thinking at the time of Jesus better, it's easier to understand what Jesus was saying, and even more so, what the rest of the New Testament was saying.